Hello, welcome to this collection development policy webinar. This session was delivered on the 23rd of April 2026. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties with the session, so I am re-recording this introduction for you. This session covers the practicalities of how to write a collection development policy and how to talk to senior leadership teams about your policy. So we hear from Sarah Pavey, who will cover what your collection development policy should include and how to write one. And then we hear from Alice Leggett and Justin Sheehan. Alice is the librarian at the Oak Parks High School, and Justin Sheehan is the deputy head, and they're going to talk about their experiences having conversations with senior leadership teams and how to make those conversations as constructive as possible. So to start, I'm going to hand over to Sarah Pavey, who is an expert in school libraries and an education consultant, and she is going to talk you through all the top tips for how to write your policy.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to be looking today at, as Hannah said, really at the practical side of writing a collection development policy. So I'm not going to be able to go into a great deal of detail in any aspect, but hopefully the idea of this will be to give you an overview so that you can get started and you can make it relevant to your own school. If you've got any particular questions, these are my details, and please feel free to reach out to me. So let's get started. What do we mean by a collection development policy? Well, I think the first thing to say is it's not just a list of resources. Your library management system can do that for you, and it can also show you where the gaps are. So the policy has got to be something a bit more than that. And in order to make it a bit more than that, we have to do some preparation work first of all. So the first thing is to think about what is the purpose of the collection that resides within your library. Does it actually fit in with what the school is trying to achieve? Is it perhaps the school's had an Ofsted inspection recently and they've actually highlighted some things they want the school to do? Does your mission actually take that into account? And what are you going to do in order to answer the questions that have been raised? Well, the best way to do this is by actually going out there and doing a collection of data. So you might talk to your senior leaders, you might talk to your people that are using your library in the wider community, not just the students, but the teachers and anybody else who might happen to wander in and need to use your services. In order to just, take the data from the people using it, that's kind of okay. But the problem is that people who use your library don't know what they don't know. So therefore, it's a good idea to get your background together, have a look at the curriculum, have a look at the sorts of clubs and activities that you might be running through your library and say, actually, does my collection enhance that? Does it support the kinds of things I'm trying to do? Once you've done all that, you've collected all the stuff and you're trying to put it together, before you do that, have another word with the users of your library. Check that you've actually covered everything, or are there other bits that you could go and do further investigation about? When you're happy with it, finally, that's when you can bung your collection development policy up there on the website alongside all the other school policies, and you share that amongst the people that are interested in what you're doing in the library. And hopefully that increases the profile of the library. It lets people understand what the library is there for. It can act as a marketing tool for those who are thinking about sending their children to your school, or a teacher perhaps who's looking for further employment. So all those things are really important with your collection development policy. It's so much more than just a list of resources. It's about how you go about things as well, as we're going to find out. So, first big thing probably is that you might say, I want this, I want this, I want this. And then the reality strikes and your finance officer says, well, you can, but I'm going to put a ceiling on how much you can spend. Some schools have a terrible situation whereby their finance officer won't tell them how much they've got to spend. And you've got to kind of like guess. And every time you want to buy something, you have to put it out there and hope that you've made a strong enough case for that wish to be granted. But far better way is to actually ask your finance officer to give you a set amount of money that you can then distribute, and you know where that money needs to be spent. So it comes back to those goals. What are you trying to do? What kinds of formats for resources are you going to have in your library? Are they going to be electronic and digital as well as just print things? Are you going to be running clubs and things like that, which also need financing? How are you going to get the things that you need in your library? Have you got trusted suppliers? Which suppliers do you use? All of that needs to go into your collection development policy. How are you going to go about weeding things? We can't have an ever expanding universe in our libraries. They are a finite space. Sometimes that space even gets reduced when classrooms are needed. So you have to think about what you're going to get rid of as well as what you're going to keep and what you need to replace. That all costs money. You might say, what's staffing got to do with this? That's all to do with the employment of the school as a whole. Well, it's also to do with your collections, because if you decide that you're going to invest in digital, for example, then you might need somebody who's got those skills, who's going to be able to develop that part of the library resources. And then there's the whole issue of how we maintain what we've got, things that, perhaps we don't want to replace or we can't replace, but need repairing as well. And all of that, things like actually putting labels on things, adding it to catalogues, all of that needs time and it needs money, unfortunately. So we've got to think about all of that in our policy. When it comes to technology, we have to again consider what is appropriate in our collection, and we have to put that in writing to show how we've made the decisions about technology along the way. We know that currently there is a bit of a sort of pullback on technology. If you look at places like Sweden, they say we are going back to the print book. So you need to kind of think in advance, is that going to start happening in English schools or UK schools as a whole? We need to think about that. How are students going to be able to access the information we've got digitally if they are blocked from getting to certain places, or the security protocols within it mean that they have to be a certain age to accept it, or the school as a whole, or even the council that actually run those databases and make the decisions on those databases, maybe they've got security extra blocks put in the place as well. We need to find out about what the school thinks about digital literacy. Is it all about online harms, or are we going to be needing to demonstrate best practice? And we need to be aware that there's a protocol coming out in 2029. Students are going to be tested on their abilities with AI. That's not just going to be online harms, that's going to be about creativity as well. So watch out for that one. Also, we have issues in technology around licensing and copyright. If you buy some online databases, you may not be able to share those outside the school. So think little things like that we've got to be careful of, because that again relates to our policy, how we use things, and also how much money we spend. And we need to be make best friends with the IT department, support department, in order to make sure that if we buy something, the infrastructure there is there to allow us to actually run it and for people to have access. No good buying in Teams, and then it doesn't work, but it is working now. So that's one good thing. So what about that inevitable thing that happens, donations? Now, if you're in an independent school, perhaps donations are more common than they might be in your average school. With donations is it tends to come from people who do not want to go down to the charity shop themselves and give their books away, or it might be that it's somebody who just doesn't want to put them in the recycling bin. So we have to be very aware that we need a policy, part of our policy, to say what we do with donations. What is acceptable? Are we going to accept some tatty old copy which has been rained on or thrown in a room somewhere for years and somebody's retrieved it? What is the physical quality of it like? And if we've got better copies in the library, why do we need to take that one? On the other hand, if it's a very rare first edition and you think, could sell that on eBay and make some money for the school library, then maybe it's worthwhile accepting it. We need to think about duplication. I know in my library, when I had duplicate copies thrust upon me by sort of very happy parents, some of which were in beautiful condition, I used to put them in a cupboard and I'd use them for prizes and things like that, or replacement if it was a very popular book, which I knew was going to need constant replacement during the school year. But we need to think about the processing because that takes time. And if somebody gives us a load of donations, of which most of them are totally useless in terms of our policy that we've already put in place, then we really don't want to spend time processing books that are never and resources that are never going to be used. Out of date technology now becomes a donation because people don't want to throw it away. We're going to return to censorship in a minute because that's a big thing. We need to be talking about whether the material that's within the resource is appropriate, whether it's age appropriate, and we're going to be delving into that side of things in a minute. Then the other thing that takes time with donations, and which time is money, is gratitude. If people give you a load of books, then you have to say thank you. Maybe they're expecting a plate to be put in that book or a message on that online resource that they're giving you to say this was donated by blah blah blah. Now, quite a few of the library management systems actually have a box that you can tick, which makes life a lot easier. But I worked in an independent school for a while, and I can tell you this, every single open day, somebody would come along, look at the library shelves, wanting to see that the book that they donated 20 years ago and make sure that it was still there. Now, that sort of thing we really can't be dealing with when space and money are tight. So we need to have a policy which explains why, no, it isn't any longer on our shelves. What about weeding? Well, again, weeding comes down to that censorship issue, which I promise you I'm going to talk about in a minute. That is really important that we make sure that we're taking off things as our lives and the world around us changes, because censorship isn't something that stands still. It can be a different viewpoint. It might be a different head coming in. It might be a change in the curriculum. It might be somebody suddenly that a school's going to concentrate on one particular subject area. It could be an Ofsted inspection that suddenly changed what your collection is going to look at. So all of those need to be looked at as well. What are we going to preserve? What can we get rid of? If you've got something which is something that the school is particularly involved with, say they're an performing arts school, and you've got a particular collection for that, maybe you need to preserve something that is out of date, but it needs to be there because it's not going to be anywhere else easily accessible, and the school needs to use it. We balance that against how much storage we've got that. And we also very much need to be aware of what do the wider school community expect to see in the library when they come in. And again, I'm going to come on to that side of things in a minute. We need to check whether our resources are age appropriate as well. And that's not just in terms of the reading levels, which is vitally important when we know there's so much fluctuation between a year 7 or a year 8 in terms of what they're capable of. It's making sure that the content is also appropriate. If we're dividing our fiction into younger fiction and young adult fiction, we need to be aware that the content of those books that it goes into the right places. It's not just the writing, it's the illustrations as well. So have a look at those. It's the subject matter. Is that appropriate? What about the language? If you've got a lot of, sort of people, a lot of books that are maybe using popular culture type language, then you might need to look at them in terms of age. It's really important. I've done a lot of work countries in the Middle East, in Dubai. And one of the things about all of this, and it'll also come into censorship as well, is the fact that there they have a school inspection at least once a year where an army of people go into the libraries and they look at every single book to see whether it conforms to the national culture, as well as it being in an international school. And if you get caught with something inappropriate, it isn't just take that off the shelves. No, they get a fine. So if they find several books or several hundred books, the school could be bankrupted by a simple inspection. So this is why I think in this day and age, we need to be much more mindful about what is actually on our shelves. I'll come back to that again in a minute. Also, our collection needs to be accessible. So all these different things, it's whether people with different types of disability, things that are visible, things that aren't visible, people who are neurodiverse, we need to look at that. People who maybe don't have English as a first language, we need to look at that. Have we got accessible resources for them? Would the format actually help in terms of the accessibility? So have we got large print books? Have we got books for children, or audio books? Have we got visual and video material as well? And all of this has to be balanced against the budget that we have got, and whether that actually is going to be sufficient for us to develop all these different aspects. We need to look at diversity, as I've mentioned before. Any school community has got a vast range of different people who are going to be visiting and using our library. So all of these become really important. Somebody needs to be able to walk into your library and say, I feel welcome here. I feel this is my place. Am I represented? So you need to make sure that that's obvious to people that are using your services. We then need to link back, as I said before, if you live in an area where there is a distinct population of people who come from a different country originally, not necessarily the children, but if the parents do or the grandparents do, then those cultures are embedded within their life outside school. So it's much kinder to them if they can see things in different languages that are on the shelves. I'm not saying that you have to have a policy for every single language in the world. That would be impossible. But what you do need to show is that you are aware of your own local community and what might support all these different aspects of using the library within that context. It might also relate to staffing as well, because have you got people on your staff who speak different languages who would be able to help you in terms of the cataloguing of the various resources that you've got to make them accessible to those students who are seeking information in a different language? Okay, let's get on to censorship. I know this is probably what most of you have tapped into this webinar for, and it is extremely important because we know what goes on in America at the moment. We know what has been going on in the Middle East. I'm aware of that, and as I explained, you can get fined. If you go to the Far East, where I've been recently, there are other issues in terms of the fact that Britannica cannot be used in a lot of schools over there because there is one entry about Chairman Mao that they disapprove of. So that wipes out the whole database. So we need to be aware of this because, as I'm sure, again, a lot of you have seen and read about, is that in Manchester, a school librarian lost her job and was taken to task, and a lot of books were removed from their library. Now, this has serious implications. It's creeping in, and we know that there's a lot of political issues at the moment, which are probably making that more common. People are having a voice, and if your parents and people in the local community have a voice as well, then this is going to become a burning issue. So what can we do about it? Well, this is a webinar for the SLA. The SLA are great. They put on lots and lots of training courses and so on. But CILIP, I would also say, is really important because CILIP have published ethical guidelines that are there. They are also underpinned not just by schools, but they are adhered to by people who are working in public libraries, people who are working in higher education, and to be honest, any other library discipline, school and school of thought as well. So you've got a massive, great community of people who can back up the idea that libraries should be diverse and inclusive, that they should be distinct from any political and social pressures, that they should also be able to have intellectual freedom, that they know about the legal issues that really are the point where you can't argue anymore against something being removed. But the whole point of a library is that it should be there, it should be for everybody, and it should allow people to make their own decisions, and it shouldn't be biased. So how do we marry that against this censorship that is actually coming in? Well, I would say number one thing, join CILIP if you haven't already. Make sure you're a member of the SLA and that you engage with their resources as well. But if you can't do that, well, then there are other things that you could try out. First of all, don't hide it under the desk. If there are censorship issues going on, if people are asking you to remove things that you don't want removed or preventing you from buying resources that you think you should have, then you need to talk about that. And you don't hide everything away and say, right, well, I'm going to have this really conventional library and I'm not going to have any controversial material in there whatsoever, because that goes against the ethics and the principles of librarianship. Then there is also the legal stuff that we do have to abide by. And that is, again, important that we look at that, go to the SLA, go to CILIP and find out where the margins are, where are the boundaries. Seek professional support from those organisations and say, no, we're not going to stand for this. We're going to change it because this is how we work within the ethics of our profession, our school library profession. So we need to be bold and we need to be brave. We also need to make sure that our policies are aligned with the curriculum that our school follows. This can be quite difficult. Again, it's about collaborating with senior leaders and teachers that we're going to hear more about in a minute. It's about, though, being totally aware of that curriculum that's followed. If you're working to an English curriculum, it is largely assessed by examinations these days, unless you're doing EPQ. So therefore, your library collection might be quite heavy in terms of textbooks and things like that, because that is what the school children are going to be looking at in order to help them with their curriculum subjects. We also, though, do need wider reading as part of our library hat. And if you're doing EPQ, you're going to have to balance how much you spend on a particular topic when maybe only one person is doing it. We need this in our collection policy to say what we do in those situations. And finally, a bit of a plug for my book, The Network Librarian. If you want to know how to have conversations and to network with others on any of these aspects, go and borrow The Network Librarian from the SLA library, or you could buy your own copy, or you could buy it, or you could borrow it from a public library as well. So we also need, as a final gesture, to say that we need to have a balanced collection that supports our extracurricular clubs and activities. What are people interested in the local area? I live in Epsom. In Epsom, horse racing is all the thing, apart from Epsom salts, which are also all the thing. But people might be interested in sport, in riding. They might be interested in chemistry because of Epsom salts. I don't know, but I could go and ask them and find out and see if I can add to my resources and so on. So we need to engage with people on these aspects as well, and it all needs to go into that collection development policy. Okay, so we have covered everything that we need in there, not just the list of resources, but also ideas for best practice, how we staff it, how we run things on a day-to-day basis. We've done all of that. How do you actually write it? Well, I've got some nice templates for you here. First of all, we can start off with an introduction. Remember, you're going to get copies of these slides so you can go back and you can have a look. This gives you what should really be going into your introductory session. You can see this is partly where you've done your research and you found out the data around your community and their user needs and so on. All of that is really about the starting point of the collection. What is it there for and what is it going to contain? The second part is the meat, if you like. This is where it's going, or the veg, if you're a vegetarian. This is where you're going to actually put the substance in there. It's going to be about how you prioritize things, how you impose limits on things, how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to maintain it, and how do you deal with censorship and complaints, as well as your donations policy. Because those two, I think, may be linked together at some points as well. The third bit is about how you look at the subjects that you've got, including your extracurricular, including your reading for pleasure. Put all of that in. How do you decide what you're going to have? What have you got at the moment and how are you going to change that? What are you hoping for in the future? Any special collections that you have because of a specialism that your school has, and any other considerations that you need to take account of, like how often do you do a stock take? What does that comprise of? How do you weed the books that you've got? All of that goes into section C. And finally, we have section D, which is how you're going to implement that policy, how you're going to evaluate it and revise it. And with these policies, every year minimum, they need to be reviewed and revised, and somebody, maybe a senior leader, needs to sign it off with a date so that it's always there as a record. And you can put that up on the school website alongside any other policies so that others in the school community can consult it and can look and can understand where they stand if they want to use your library. That is an awful lot of stuff to do, isn't it? A huge amount, particularly if you're a solo librarian. How on earth do you write policy with that amount of substance in it? Well, luckily, these days we have a little friend called AI. And I would say this is a perfect job for AI. Because one of my favourite AIs for formal documents is Notebook LM, which is completely free. So if you uploaded your survey results, your library management system statistics, any curricular documents, any Ofsted inspections, any school mission statements, all of those things, your own library's handbook, anything like that, upload it all into Notebook LM, go back to those little things that we had, those different sections that we've got here, all of those, put them in one at a time, get it to do each one, even maybe the subsections, get it to do those individually until you've got the whole thing together. When you've got the whole thing together, I would recommend, because Notebook LM is all right, but it's not particularly beautiful or pretty. And it's, you'd still have to do a lot of work with it. So take the Notebook LM output and put it into something like Claude AI, which will produce you the most beautifully set out text document that you can use as the basis. You still have to go through it and tweak it. You can't rely on it 100% because Claude is trying to be your friend. And if it doesn't understand something, it will just make something up to please you. So whatever you do, go through it. And then I would say a really good thing to use if you want to put in some extra sort of illustrations and things like that is to use Canva. I should say that Claude actually does use, it will put things into charts for you as well. But Canva, you can actually then make diagrams, add things to it to make it look a readable document rather than just a rather dry text policy. So I hope that has been really interesting. I'm 2 minutes over. Whoops. But I hope you found that really interesting and found it of practical use as well. And thank you to the SLA for allowing me to present this.
Thank you, Sarah. That was an incredibly well done speed through of how to build a collection development policy. So I hope it was very helpful for our members. And hopefully, as Sarah said, we are sharing the slides afterwards. So I hope you weren't like scribbling really quickly to try and get all of that down. So I'm going to hand over to Alice and Justine, who are going to talk a bit more about like how to have those conversations with SLT, which we've already had a conversation question about in the chat. So I'm going to hand over to you guys to say your bit. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi guys. So I think Justine and I were asked to speak because I have this experience of both why we need policies and how to make them function with SLT support. So I'm just going to run through sort of my experiences, and then I'm going to hand over to Justine, who's going to talk a bit about from an SLT perspective, how you can have those conversations. So my background is I've worked in 2 schools, and the first school I worked in did want me to create a policy. I actually borrowed advice from Lucas Maxwell because his school was just down the road. We put together a policy. It wasn't super in depth. No one really looked at it. And it meant that when we did have a challenge, it was really bad. We didn't have anything to fall back on. It ended up in the press. Staff ended up on strike. It really, really blew up. So when I came here, I was really keen that we had that we had a good policy in place. Those conversations can be really hard. I kind of had a cheat code because I applied for the job with Justine when my school was still on strike. So you sort of already knew what was going on. So Justine sort of had an idea of why a policy might be important, but also it can be quite difficult because you don't often want to say this could happen here. We're concerned about censorship. You don't want to tell your new school that that bad things can happen and that you need to be careful. So the way I frame this conversation and that I would advise framing it is just risk management and preparedness, which you would do in any other area of your school. If you're going on a trip, you would fill in a risk assessment. So having a library policy, like Sarah says, with detailed covering all the things you do. I'm speaking specifically about censorship at the moment, but about everything is really important. So when I and then Justine started writing our policy, we went from a position of wanting it to be as wide, give students as wide as access as possible. So we used a lot of the documents Sarah's already mentioned, some that already exist. So things from the American Library Association, IFLA, CILIP, the SLA. There's lots of statements. I've got this very handy. You're not going to be able to see it, but I'm happy to share this. And I think it is on the SLA website. This is Intellectual Freedom in the School Library, which lists all the different laws and policies that feed into intellectual freedom. And then we also linked the policy to other policies that already existed within the school. So our equality and diversity policy, literacy, our behaviour policy, all those different areas that were covered, we would linked in. And one of the most important things we did was that we had a detailed plan for if a challenge is received, what happens when that happens, who does it go to, how do we respond, who is involved, and what are the potential outcomes from that. And we also specified who we will take challenges from, so that and other things like we don't take if it's been generated by AI, as happened in the case in Salford. We won't respond to those kind of things, and so it has to be someone. The policy, the challenge, or the reconsideration, or whatever it is they want us to do, has to come from someone within the school community, teacher, staff, parent. It can't be from outside people. And we also included student voice, which I think is really important. It's really important to remember why we're doing this job and who we're doing it for. Once we've done that, we took it to governors. You should have a link governor in your school that kind of manages the library. If you don't, ask for one and try and find out who they are as well. I'm just checking my notes, very unprofessional. And alongside this, which I think Justine is going to cover in a bit more detail, alongside creating this policy and having these conversations, advocating for the library as a whole school resource. What happens in the library affects the whole school. So putting yourself out there as much as you can so that you have that support ready for you if you need it. The SLA asked me to have sort of 3 key takeaways. if it was one of those things of like, if you leave here today, you should have, and there's 3 things that you're going to do, these should be them. So the first one I came up with was this idea, my friend Christopher always says this, inoculate. So have constant conversations with staff, with anyone involved in the library, specifically about censorship, just about, you know, what's happening in other schools, what your concerns might be, share articles, have visible signs of what your ethics are. So things like the poster, include students in these conversations. So I teach a banned books lesson every year. We have displays for banned books week, things like that. So that idea of like, so that if a challenge does come, you're not completely caught unawares, you won't be caught unawares, but other people won't be caught unawares. This idea of inoculating people to you know that this is a risk, but we've got a policy for that. Second thing was, don't reinvent the wheel. It can feel really overwhelming to be like, oh my God, I've got to go away and write an entire policy. Lots of policies already exist. Ours is on our website. You can borrow from other schools. I think it's more important to have something and then to fiddle around with it afterwards. And to use templates. Don't feel like you've got to go from scratch. My policy was shared from someone else. It's kind of a living document that gets changed all the time anyway. So don't feel overwhelmed at the thought that I need to write this perfect document. Just get something done. And my third thing was include student voice in any policy that you create, which I think is really again, it's just really essential to what we do. I'm going to hand over to Justine, who is going to talk a bit about, I think some of us often worry, you know, I'm really lucky that I've got an amazing manager who will stay late after school with me and talk on webinars and put up with me dragging leads into her office. But some people don't have that relationship. You know, different structures in different schools don't work. So Justine's kind of the voice. You're SLT everywhere now. I see you have to speak for all of SLT.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me, first of all. I'm really pleased to be able to speak about this. I don't think my advice is going to help you write a collection development policy, but I'm hoping that my insights can provide a way for you to hook SLT members to support you with the policy, which I think I can be helpful in. So the first thing I think to remember is you own a space in your school that is absolutely unique, and it is such a powerful space. I only have to look at Alice and the way that she has transformed our library from actually quite a dark and dull area to somewhere that is vibrant, that houses a multitude of varieties of students and books, and she's passionate and sorry, but you know the power of a library is huge, and I'm sure you know that. I don't need to tell you that. So thinking about SLT members may not always appreciate the power of an LRC, and you need to hook them in. I'm an English teacher, so I already know that, you know, I'm already a fan of reading, but there may be some maths SLT leaders out there that, you know, you really need to convince. And what I would just suggest, one of the ways to do that, SLT are very, very keen on results. Any kind of impact, they love it, and it can be in any form. So quite often in the early days, before I had a deeper understanding of libraries, and I have been educated by Alice Leggett here, you know, Alice would actually say to me, Year 7, this term they've taken out more books than they did in the entire year last year. SLT, cha-ching, love that. Great, it's an impact. I can talk to the SLT about that. I can, you know, that's a real indicator from my perspective that something is going well in the library and that students are reading more, and I want to hear that. And of course, there is an established link between readers and results, and so, you know, you are in really powerful positions there. I think this was mentioned earlier by Sarah, but actually linking to the curriculum, the school curriculum is hugely important. Reaching out to those subject leaders, finding out the topics that they are teaching, and having books around those subjects, not just confined to that, but just reaching out to show that the library is in touch with lessons. It's actually part of teaching, learning curriculums that are going on throughout the school. sorry, just my stomach was coming. Equally to that, in terms of the curriculum, I would just say you need to be relevant, have relevant conversations with SLT. So do pick up on things like school vision, do pick up on what the school improvement plan. There will be something to do, there will be something connected to literacy that you really need to be a part of. I would say communicate and update as regularly as possible. I am so lucky. I am very busy. I am running around a lot. Most of SLT will be, especially at this time of year. But I am so thankful to Alice that actually we do meet. Alice is flexible with that. Sometimes she will come into my office and we'll just sit for 10 minutes, and that is absolutely fine. But that time is really important for me as SLT to understand the issues that are going on, not just in our LRC, but actually, nationally. And Alice has told me, educated me about the situation in Manchester, so I am fully aware of that. It's hugely important to know about. So if a parent comes in, I am aware, I'm forewarned and forearmed. And I think what I would say is inclusion is absolutely huge for everybody at the moment. It is the word, and there's a new government white paper been released recently that is all about inclusion, and your area is the library is just the heart of that. So I would run with that in terms of SLT as well. I don't know if that I could probably say more, but I'm aware you probably have lots of speakers and lots to do. But I would just say keep your SLT link informed, and if you're tweaking the policy, just have conversations around it so that the SLT link knows what is happening. And I think sometimes you just have to be careful about what you say just to get in and make those conversations happen. But I'm very, very lucky.
Yes. That's lovely. Thank you so much, both of you. Hello. I hope you enjoyed that session and you have lots of ideas for how to write your collection development policy. If you have questions about any of the topics raised, you can contact us at info@sla.org.uk. You can also head to our community pages on our website and see the discussions that took place following the session, including answers to the questions that were asked in the chat during that conversation. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.